In the frozen, snow-covered forest of Holtzwihr, France, in late January 1945, an unbelievable scene was unfolding. Hundreds of German soldiers surged across the white expanse, determined to wipe out a small American force holding the woods. At the front stood a lone young American lieutenant, perched on the burning hull of a tank destroyer, his figure silhouetted like a ghost against the swirling smoke and fire. The thunder of a .50 caliber machine gun erupted from his position, tearing through the icy haze. The Germans poured fire at him relentlessly, intent on bringing down the audacious soldier. But he did not back down. That man was Audie Murphy, and alone, he was holding back an entire German company. The story of Audie Murphy, the 19-year-old soldier who achieved the impossible one man against 250, remains one of the most enduring legends in the history of the United States military during World War II. Audie Murphy came from humble beginnings, a small-framed farm boy from Texas who had to lie about his age to enlist after Pearl Harbor. Yet just 3 years later, after fighting across North Africa, Italy, and France, Murphy had become a fearless combat veteran with an unmatched record of valor. By the time he reached the frozen woods of Holtzwihr, he had already been wounded multiple times and decorated for bravery, but nothing could have prepared him for the life-or-death ordeal that awaited there. On the 26th of January 1945, 2nd Lieutenant Murphy and his comrades from Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd U.S. Infantry Division had just secured a patch of forest near the village of Holtzwihr when the storm broke. This was the height of brutal winter fighting, as Allied forces pushed to eliminate the Colmar Pocket, the last German stronghold on French soil. Following their defeat in the Ardennes, German forces launched Operation Nordwind, a desperate counter-offensive through the frozen terrain of Alsace, hoping to reclaim lost ground and salvage morale. In this context, the clash at Holtzwihr held critical weight. If the Germans broke through the forest, they would threaten the entire southern flank of the Alsace front. For Murphy and his unit, holding their ground was not an option, it was an order of survival. Alsace, January 1945. Bitter winds and nearly half a meter of snow had turned eastern France into a white battlefield. In sub-zero temperatures nearing 10 degrees Celsius, Allied forces launched their offensive to wipe out the Colmar Pocket, Germany's final grip on the west bank of the Rhine. Just weeks earlier, on New Year's Day, Hitler had thrown his last punch on the Western Front, Operation Nordwind. Over 17 German divisions launched a sudden assault into northern Alsace, forcing the U.S. 7th Army to pull back to the Moder River. Though the offensive inflicted serious casualties, it ultimately failed. The German 19th Army in Colmar became the last to hold, and they were ordered to defend it to the death, as if it were sacred German soil. In response to the situation, General Eisenhower ordered U.S. and French forces to concentrate on clearing out the Colmar Pocket. The battle-hardened U.S. 3rd Infantry Division veterans of North Africa and Italy was sent to spearhead the attack north of Colmar, crossing the frozen Ill River and striking at key German positions around Holtzwihr and Riedwihr. These villages were strategic choke points, heavily fortified with machine guns, anti-tank weapons, and elite troops from the 2nd Mountain Division recently withdrawn from Norway. On January 23rd, the 30th Infantry Regiment led the initial assault through the Riedwihr woods and was devastated. The frozen ground made it impossible to dig in. German artillery and small arms fire tore through American lines in the open snowfields. Forced to retreat, they left behind dozens of fallen comrades frozen in the field. The next morning, the 15th Infantry Regiment, including Audie Murphy's Company B, was ordered to take their place. As soon as they reached the edge of the woods, they came under intense German fire. By the end of the day, the company was nearly wiped out. Only 18 men remained out of 120, and all officers had been killed except Murphy. On the night of January 25th, amid sub-zero temperatures, the survivors dug shallow defenses with bare hands in the frozen ground. Murphy, now acting company commander, later recalled, "The only thing we gained from the digging was a little warmth to keep from freezing to death. They didn't know if they would still be alive by morning." But just before dawn, a glimmer of hope arrived. 2 M10 tank destroyers from the 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion rolled up in support. Murphy quickly reorganized the defense, placing one M10 forward to anchor the firepower, the other along with a few armored scout vehicles on the vulnerable right flank. He set up a forward command post in a shallow ditch near the front, linking a field telephone back to Battalion HQ to call for artillery if needed. But the position was far from secure. Ahead lay an open field leading to Holtzwihr. The left flank was exposed, held only loosely by a nearby unit. Murphy understood the reality. The Germans wouldn't wait long. Then came the order crackling through the handset. "Hold the position at all costs. Reinforcements are on their way." Murphy gripped his rifle and looked toward Holtzwihr, barely visible through the haze of snow. He said nothing, but every man around him knew hell was coming with the morning light. 2 p.m., January 26th, 1945. The Holtzwihr woods shook as German artillery thundered from the village. Shells ripped through the trees and blasted columns of snow skyward. Then, through the smoke, came the full weight of the counterattack. 6 panzer tanks and roughly 250 infantry in white camouflage, advancing like a wave through the whitened fields. A sea of white was pouring toward us. One American soldier later said, his voice tight. Murphy immediately grabbed the phone to call for artillery support. 6 tanks, 250 infantry, coordinates as follows. He hadn't even put the receiver down when an 88mm shell ripped through the sky and blew apart the M10 right behind him. Flames erupted violently. The crew suffered heavy casualties. The remaining M10 fired back bravely but didn't last long. It slid into a shallow ditch. Its main gun collapsed, unable to fight. The crew was forced to abandon the vehicle and flee into the woods. In less than 10 minutes, both self-propelled guns had been taken out. The battlefield now held only a handful of surviving troops, damaged weapons, and shattered trenches facing an entire German company bearing down. Audie Murphy gave the order to retreat to save his men. But himself? He stayed. Murphy stayed behind, alone. In the hail of bullets, carbine in hand, he fired to cover his comrades' withdrawal. "We were furious about leaving him behind in that hell," a soldier recalled. But Murphy insisted, "One man can do it, and only one is needed." Amid the smoke and chaos, Lieutenant Murphy crouched alone behind a tree at the forest's edge, his carbine cracking non-stop at the oncoming Germans. He kept calling HQ, calmly adjusting coordinates to rain down artillery fire. American shells answered fiercely, erupting in smoke and flame among the enemy ranks. Murphy saw German troops fall in the snowy haze, heard their screams, and still they came, as if nothing could stop them. Soon the Germans were within 50 yards. Murphy's carbine was empty. As he prepared to retreat, he spotted the 50 cal heavy machine gun on the burning M10 nearby. Flames licked the fuel tank, the 90mm rounds inside ready to explode. But Murphy knew this was the last chance. He leapt from cover and climbed onto the flaming tank destroyer. In full view of both allies and enemies, Murphy mounted the burning vehicle, ducked behind the Browning M2, racked the bolt, and fired. Private Charles Owen watched in awe as his commander worked the 50 like a master, mowing down the enemy. I don't know if he'd ever trained on it, but the Germans were clearly terrified. The American 50 caliber machine gun, firing 12.7mm rounds, could easily pierce light armor, and for the German infantry, it was a nightmare. Murphy concentrated his fire on enemy troops. He knew that if the 90mm shells couldn't penetrate German tank armor, the machine gun had even less chance, and wasting ammo would be pointless. Instead, he aimed precisely at white-clad figures darting between trees and behind mounds. Each burst he fired brought down another German soldier. Murphy stood alone, his body silhouetted atop the burning tank destroyer, a clear target for every German weapon. Enemy troops unleashed a hail of bullets from 3 directions. Rifle and machine gun rounds struck the M10's hull with a shrill clang. German anti-tank and tank guns pounded the area. Yet Murphy kept firing, non-stop, for nearly an hour. German soldiers tried to use the smoke and flames to close in on him. One group of over a dozen crept low along a shallow ditch to flank him from the right. But he spotted them in time. I swept the ditch with slow bursts. The Germans collapsed in a heap right where they were, Murphy later recalled. Suddenly, a deafening explosion erupted. A German 88mm shell hit the M10 right beneath Murphy. The blast threw him hard against the turret, nearly tossing him off the vehicle. Shrapnel and debris flew in every direction. Smoke and fire engulfed him, and soldiers at the forest edge thought he had been killed. But as the haze cleared, Murphy's silhouette emerged again, still clinging to the top of the burning tank destroyer, still fighting. Between bursts, he picked up the phone to relay updated coordinates to artillery units in the rear. He used the chaos and smoke as cover, hiding his position from the enemy. They had no idea where death was coming from. He would later joke that the blast finally warmed up my feet for the first time in 3 days, having stood for hours atop frozen steel in sub-zero weather. Amid the madness, Murphy took a bullet to the thigh. Blood soaked his pant leg, but he barely seemed to notice, or perhaps he simply ignored it. The young soldier kept pressing the trigger, even as German shells and gunfire rained around him. He fired so long that the 50 cal barrel became scorching hot, the heat and smoke burning his face, but he never let go of the trigger. Several German soldiers managed to charge within 10 yards of his position, but every one of them fell to Murphy's cold, precise fire. Witnessing the unbelievable sight, Sergeant Elmer Brawley, watching from the forest edge, recalled in shock. The Germans got within just a dozen steps of Murphy, but he wiped them out right at his feet in the clearing, along the tree line, even in the bushes. If he saw movement, he shot. Murphy held the line alone for nearly an hour, repelling wave after wave of German assaults. His relentless fire broke the will of the enemy infantry. Without ground support, the German tanks began to hesitate. They halted just ahead, firing sporadically while probing for weaknesses. Then, a piercing shriek tore through the air. Murphy looked up through the haze. He spotted P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers from the U.S. Air Force appearing in the grey sky. The roar of their engines echoed across the battlefield. The end was near for the Germans. Over the radio, Murphy immediately called in smoke rounds from the artillery to mark targets for the incoming pilots. The Thunderbolts began their attack runs, strafing and rocketing German positions on the ground. Below, Murphy still hadn't left his post. When the Germans attempted to regroup for another assault, he boldly requested artillery to fire directly in front of his own position to stop them. "I figured if the Germans could take it, I could too," he later said nonchalantly. Faced with such unbelievable resistance, the morale of the German troops began to collapse. They slowly realized that a single American soldier atop a burning vehicle had been holding them at bay the entire time. Dozens of German soldiers lay dead or wounded in the snow. The rest began to falter, then retreated in disarray toward the village of Holtzwihr. Without infantry support, the German tanks also withdrew to avoid being isolated and destroyed. I can understand why the German infantry never found me, but I'll never forgive those tank gunners for being such poor shots. Really sloppy. Murphy joked years later about his incredible luck that day. At that moment, Murphy's field telephone went dead. The line had been severed by shrapnel. Surveying the empty battlefield, now clear of Germans, he finally ceased fire. His last belt of ammo had run dry. He slowly climbed down from the tank destroyer, just as flames began to reach the ammunition stores inside. Murphy limped back toward the forest's edge, where his comrades had been watching in stunned silence. Behind him, the M10 exploded. Its turret blasted off the hull. Had he stayed just a few minutes longer, he would have been killed. As Murphy stepped into the trees, the toll became clear. His body soaked in sweat and blood, his legs numb from cold and injury. He was too exhausted, too terrified, to feel anything. I turned my back on the Germans and never looked back. I was so weak from fear and fatigue I didn't care what was behind me anymore. Murphy later admitted of that moment. His body trembled. whether from the cold or the aftermath of adrenaline, likely both. But he had done the impossible, held off an entire enemy company alone, and saved his unit from total destruction. When Murphy returned to his unit, every eye stared at him in disbelief, as if a ghost had walked out of death itself. But the young lieutenant had no intention of resting. Ignoring his comrades' pleas to bandage his wounds, Murphy brushed off any medical attention. He shouted, "Everyone follow me, let's go." With the remaining 18 men of his company, Murphy immediately launched a swift counterattack on the German positions they had just lost. Inspired by their commander's fearless act, the surviving American soldiers charged forward with determination. They quickly cleared out the scattered German troops lingering around the edge of Holtzwihr forest. The enemy, now completely broken in spirit, fled in chaos back across the Colmar Canal. By the evening of January 26, Company B had regained and secured the battlefield, holding the forest until reinforcements arrived. That night, Murphy and his men lay silently beside the bodies of their fallen comrades. Brad Croker, one of the soldiers, later recalled, "We were lying right next to the Colmar Canal. After a hellish day, we crawled to the water's edge to drink. There were so many bodies that we had to push them aside just to scoop up water. The battlefield at Holtzwihr was strewn with corpses and shattered weapons. The entire field was stained red with frozen blood in the bitter cold." On the 27th of January 1945, now reinforced, the Allies resumed their offensive and liberated the village of Holtzwihr. The German Colmar Pocket collapsed swiftly within days. Nearly all remaining German forces west of the Rhine in Alsace were either eliminated or forced to surrender. The Colmar campaign ended in victory, opening a direct path into Germany for the Allies. Yet for the soldiers who had fought there, the memories of Holtzwihr would never fade. For Murphy's surviving comrades, they knew they owed their lives to him. Years later, Private Charles Owen reflected emotionally, "He saved us. If not for what Audie did that day, our entire company would have been wiped out." News of the incredible feat at Holtzwihr spread quickly through the ranks. The regimental command immediately recommended Audie Murphy for the Medal of Honor, the highest award in the U.S. military. After thorough review of the reports, Murphy was promoted to first lieutenant and officially received the Medal of Honor on the 2nd of June 1945 from Lieutenant General Alexander Patch, commander of the U.S. 7th Army, during a formal ceremony near Salzburg, Austria. That same ceremony also awarded him the Legion of Honor and presented the Presidential Unit Citation to the entire 3rd Infantry Division for their outstanding performance at Colmar. The shimmering Medal of Honor on Murphy's chest was a fitting recognition for what he had done. His official citation read, "For over an hour, the Germans hurled all available firepower to eliminate Murphy, but he held his ground. He killed or wounded approximately 50 enemy soldiers. His indomitable courage and refusal to retreat saved his company from possible encirclement and destruction, allowing the unit to hold the forest, the enemy's objective at the time. Indeed, by single-handedly halting an entire German company for nearly an hour and then leading a counterattack, Audie Murphy achieved an unparalleled feat in the history of the U.S. Army. But the Medal of Honor was just the beginning. Audie Murphy would become the most decorated U.S. soldier of World War II. Including the Medal of Honor, he received 33 medals and awards from the United States, France, and Belgium, among them the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars, 3 Purple Hearts, and the Legion of Merit, essentially every U.S. Army decoration for valor that existed at the time. At just 20 years old, Murphy emerged from the war as America's most decorated soldier. His youthful face and slight frame, paired with his extraordinary battlefield record, appeared on the cover of Life magazine in late 1945. Across the country, Americans hailed his name and praised him as a living legend. Above all, the story of Murphy at Holtzwihr became the stuff of legend. Newspapers lauded the young hero. The public was captivated by the question of what could drive one soldier to perform such extraordinary acts. Reporters sought out Murphy for interviews. In one such meeting after the war, When asked what compelled him to climb atop the burning tank destroyer and face down an entire German company, Murphy simply shrugged and replied, "They were killing my friends." The plain-spoken answer struck a deep chord with the American people. It revealed that behind his heroism was not ambition or glory, but an unshakable bond of brotherhood and a willingness to die to protect his fellow soldiers. After the battle, Murphy was sent to the rear to recover and complete the formalities of his commendations. In September 1945, he was officially discharged from the army with a 50% disability, rating the result of multiple combat wounds and declining health. Returning home to Texas at the age of 21, Murphy was suddenly a national celebrity. He was hailed as America's #1 war hero. At first, he considered applying to West Point, but abandoned the idea upon realizing he lacked the academic qualifications. Instead, he was invited to parades, speaking tours, and public events across the country to help rally morale in post-war America. The governments of France and Belgium also awarded him their highest honors in recognition of his role in their liberation. However, behind the spotlight, Murphy carried deep emotional scars. He often suffered from insomnia and depression, at times sleeping with a loaded pistol under his pillow out of lingering fear. Like many veterans, Murphy was afflicted with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, a condition not yet fully understood at the time. He endured recurring nightmares of the battlefield and was once brought to tears while watching a documentary about war orphans. For a while, Murphy turned to poetry as a way to cope. His poem, "The Crosses Grow on Anzio," revealed his grief and deep empathy for the loss and sacrifice he had witnessed. In later years, he became one of the first public voices to speak out about combat trauma, advocating for greater government support for returning veterans. Thanks to his wartime fame, Murphy was offered an unexpected new path into the world of film. In 1949, he published his memoir To Hell and Back, chronicling his wartime experiences. The book became a bestseller and was later adapted into a film in 1955, with Murphy himself playing the lead role. To Hell and Back became a massive box office success and held Universal's earnings record for 2 decades. Building on this success, Murphy gradually secured his place in Hollywood, starring in a total of 44 films throughout his career, mostly westerns and war movies. He also ventured into songwriting, composing several country tracks. Despite his celebrity status, Murphy remained humble and soft-spoken. He once admitted that he was uncomfortable being hailed as a hero, believing that many of his fallen comrades deserved the recognition far more than he did. On the 28th of May, 1971, Audie Murphy tragically died in a plane crash on Brushy Mountain, Virginia. He was 46 years old. His funeral was held with full military honors. Murphy was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery, near the Memorial Amphitheater, and his gravesite remains one of the most visited in the cemetery. People remember him not just for his glittering medals, but for the courage and selfless devotion he came to embody. More than 80 years have passed, yet the story of Audie Murphy at Holtzwihr has never faded. It remains not only a stirring chapter of unmatched bravery, but also a poignant reminder of unbreakable brotherhood forged under fire. From a poor orphaned boy, Audie Murphy rose to become a legend, a symbol of unwavering resolve and the courageous heart of the American soldier. His actions continue to inspire generations, proving that heroes are not born great, but are forged in hardship and loyalty. Murphy's story stands as a defining moment of World War II, where a lone soldier held the line under conditions that would break both body and spirit. It wasn't the sheer number of medals that etched his name into military history, but the stand he made at Holtzwihr. There, his defiance against overwhelming odds became one of the clearest examples of raw courage in the face of superior enemy force. In the smoke and frost of that Alsatian winter, it wasn't artillery or armor that held the field, it was the will of one man. And sometimes, it is in moments like those that the outcome of an entire war can be shaped.